Good. The sun's shining in Melbourne this morning. For
Oh,
once.
fantastic.
It's going to be
Always
like
a good start.
17 degrees today. I can't believe it. It's been freezing. How's Sydney?
Sydney is wet and rainy, so we're looking at about probably 15 degrees. Weather isn't great, but look, it works. It works.
I know. It's not too bad compared to Scotland. Winter in Australia is tropical.
Summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. I think we've got some people joining now. So just to let everyone know, firstly, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. The webinar will be recorded, and we will share a copy of it with you on email after the event. And Ben, I was just thinking about the Q&A. Do you reckon maybe if people want to just ask any questions as we go along, do you think that would be the best way forward rather than waiting till the end?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if anyone has particular questions as we're going through, it probably makes a lot more sense to just type a question into the chat box so I can answer it live on that particular subject rather than waiting till the end when it might not be as relevant.
Yeah, I'm just going to check with Stacey in terms of how will the questions come up in my chat. Yeah, they'll come up. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Excellent. All right, we'll get started. So just by way of introductions, my name is Caroline Guthrie and I look after the Melbourne office here in Perigon, and I'm joined by Ben Wall, who is a director from our Sydney office. For those of you that haven't worked with Perigon before, I think it's be good to share a little bit of information on our teams and recruitment specialisms. We were founded back in 2010 in Sydney, and we now have offices and a presence in Brisbane and Sydney, with 5 specialist teams doing niche recruitment across accounting, both temporary and permanent services. Financial services, a specialist niche in the FS space. Our business support teams provide both temporary and permanent placement services, and technology, and also our executive search team. So if we haven't worked together before, I think it would be great to, for us to reach out to you, catch up, and perhaps we can provide you with a little bit more information around our services and maybe how we can help. So without further ado, I might just pass on to Ben to kick off.
Thanks, Caroline. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I guess, first of all, before we get stuck into the first slide, I wanted to give you a bit of a high-level update that we've had recently from some data from SEEK and also from CBA. Recently, we've found there's been quite a high number of job ads, but that's been quite well balanced with a fairly even amount of applicants. So the economy, although it is doom and gloom in some sectors, we're still finding there are a lot of companies that are still recruiting roles and are replacing roles and are still a decent amount of applicants across there. Yeah. More broadly as well, the economic factors all point to a bit of a pickup in the economy towards the back end of 24 and early in 2025.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
Okay. Today we're here to talk to you about attracting top talent and when you're recruiting for your team, how to get the best people for your team. A couple of strategies that we like to talk about is initially really just looking at sourcing strategies. How do you actually get candidates from where they are in their current job into your company, or how do you get them attracted to your company? The key thing we like to look at initially is what are you doing to attract them? And the obvious ones are different sorts of job portals, things like SEEK, Indeed, LinkedIn, your own company website. There could be flyers and things like that, depending on what type of business you're in. And always my favourite is any referrals from either your own network or from people in your team. It's very rare that we see across hundreds of businesses that if someone's referred, they don't work out. Generally, they're tried and tested by the person who's referred them, and they also want to make a good impression on their peers and on their business. So generally, we find good people refer good people, so that can really be the lifeblood of building a strong team.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Moving on from there, we also look at when you are attracting people in, what are the reasons they're coming to your business? Is it for the type of company you are? Is it for career progression? All those sorts of things. So make sure you're really clear up front about what you're offering and what the opportunity is and why someone wants to join. From there, if you're not looking at a direct sourcing strategy yourself, which can be quite good, it can obviously save you a lot of money, it can be quite quick, it can be quite good. One thing that's problematic with the direct sourcing strategy is timing. If you're only looking for somebody over that 30-day period that your ad's up, it can be quite limiting in terms of the range and the pool of candidates you get. And that's where I guess the reason we're here, coming into bringing an agency on board, can actually add a lot of value, because we can talk to candidates that we've been dealing with 3, 4, 5 years ago. They might be people that have been referred to us. They might be people that we have currently in other processes, and then we can help to bring them to your business. Really, using an agency, the key benefit we see is it can save you a lot of time, and it can actually give you a much wider pool of candidates who may not previously be interested in your business for different sorts of reasons, but we can help sell that for you. We can broaden the search, we can broaden the people that you look at, and the key thing is we can actively tap up people who are passively in roles and not necessarily actively looking for a job.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you make, Ben, is around that articulation of the value proposition. Often in interviews, we will ask candidates, why do you want to work for Perigon Group? But in the same instance, we've got to be able to have a really compelling value proposition if we want to really attract the best consultants out there. So, as I say, articulating that is super important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And moving on from there, once you do have someone at the desk for an interview or on video for an interview, it's really important to make sure you've got a really smooth process to interview them, to engage them, to sell your business to them, to make sure there's no surprises if and when they do start. So throughout that whole process, we'd suggest the first thing is, particularly in this post-COVID market, the person interviewing the candidate really needs to be able to sell their business. It's not just a matter of these days, hi, we've got a role, we're assuming all the candidates interviewing are interested in this role. We really advise our line managers to sell their business, to actually talk about, like Caroline said, the value proposition, why someone wants to join the team. Candidates these days are a lot more sophisticated. They'll often have multiple opportunities that they're interviewing for at once, and they want to know what's best about your opportunity. So you've got a really good opportunity to be the face of your business, to sell why people join, previous success stories, and talk about what their career can look like over the next 3, 6, 12 months and into the future.
Yeah, a lot of candidates, when they kind of talk to us after they've been through the interview sort of process, one of the key things that they will comment on is the rapport building with the interviewer. So I think it is super important for us to be self-aware around how we are projecting, and really putting the candidate at ease, because if they're at ease, you'll see the real person.
Exactly. Making sure you offer that personal connection. People take roles because they get along with the interviewer, not just because of the company. They want that personal connection with the people they're going to be working with day to day.
The other thing I was just going to jump in with, Ben, is just in terms of timing. Look, I understand that things are happening in businesses, and all stakeholders who need to be involved aren't always available in certain, timelines, but just be really aware around the length of time it's taking from CV review, first interview, second interview. It needs to be a fairly dynamic process. Dynamic people want to work in a dynamic company, and so the interview process in itself can be make or break in terms of a candidate choosing to join.
Yeah, and on that, Caroline, what would you say is a fair time frame for an interview process for a candidate, from CV receipt to getting an offer?
Yeah, I mean, look, if it's a temporary position, it should be done in a matter of 2-3 days. That is my belief as someone who's recruited temporary positions for many years. Temporary candidates are available immediately. They want to work, and so if people are taking too long, they're going to miss out on the best candidates because, you know, ABC company down the road wants to hire them too. In terms of a perm process, look, there's no probably one answer to that, but I would be saying applications reviewed within a matter of days, first interviews set up within a matter of days. The process overall, depending on how many stages, should not really be taking any longer than sort of 10 days. Would be my advice. As I say, you want to keep the candidate engaged. You want to keep them engaged, and that dynamic process is going to bode well for you.
Absolutely. And one thing that I'd suggest for anyone that is hiring on the stakeholder point is make sure all your key stakeholders are going to be there for that 2 or 3 week period throughout the interviews. So if someone's got a holiday planned, or they're on leave, or have some internal training and things like that, or board meetings, if possible, try and structure your interview process outside of that, so all of your key stakeholders are available to interview all candidates in the process in a fair and reasonable timeline.
Agreed.
And from there, once you have done all of that and you've got to the point where you're offering the candidate, again, this should happen fairly quickly. Once first, second, potentially third interviews have happened, candidate's happy with the role, the hiring manager's happy with the candidate, we always find managing the offer process should happen fairly quickly. You need to offer the candidate, they might need a day or two to think about it, but then move on from there. There shouldn't be further hoops to jump through post that, except for references. However, if you can manage that part of the process smoothly, you'll have a much higher conversion rate of actually being able to get people to join your business and have a really smooth and clean process when they're joining, and start with a good taste in their mouth as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. So we might move on to the next piece. So I really wanted to have a conversation around bias and potential things to look out for, particularly when you're going through that candidate screening process and the interview process. Like, as human beings, we love to take sort of mental shortcuts, which is often a good thing. Helps us to make decisions very quickly. However, there can be some challenges that we might want to be aware of when it comes to, I guess, our own unconscious biases and those of others who may be in the interview process with us. The halo horn bias is a cognitive one where we kind of allow one trait, whether that's good or bad, to overshadow all of the others. So when we're interviewing, we're looking at that one good or bad trait, and we're not considering lots of other things that are going on throughout the process. So one example in my mind might be a candidate might be late for an interview. Are we then perceiving that candidate as potentially being disorganised, maybe a little bit irresponsible? Another example might be we're interviewing someone that are particularly well groomed, well presented, well spoken, super articulate. Are we perceiving them as being smarter, more intelligent? So just something to be kind of aware of, I would say. Another example, an example of superficial bias can be around something like physical appearance. Yeah, how someone can look might cause us to either favour or disfavour them based on maybe how attractive they are, their height, their weight, or even something like their personal style. And it can also then sort of reinforce or even trigger any cultural, racial, gender biases that we may have in our unconscious also. So I think that's a really interesting one. And confirmation bias, I also find really interesting, and I often catch myself. It's our kind of tendency to look for information that already reinforces our sort of firmly held previous beliefs and ideas. Okay, no one really likes to admit that they're wrong, hey? And confirmation bias is how our brains look for information to kind of back up what we already believe to be true. So kind of in other words, we're talking about we're cherry picking data and information to support our sort of intuition or our innate beliefs about a candidate. Quite interesting topic, and I mean, there's many biases. We could go on for days around this, but I just kind of chose, it says 5 there, it should be 3. Anyway, it doesn't matter. There's a heap of them, and I think it's just that consciousness and understanding how our brains work, and our biases come from a whole host of experiences and our upbringing and so on. Any questions on that one?
I think just one thing I'd like to add there is probably a key thing to balance the bias is having a checklist of, say, 10 things that you need the person to have or that you're looking for them to have when you're hiring for a role. So, yeah, your biases might come into play then with how they look or the time they turn up and things like that. But to have a more balanced outlook on the candidate, if you've got some checklists or some key criteria and things like that, that can always help, particularly if you're comparing a number of candidates, can really help after that week of interviews to actually look back on it and then decide who actually is the best candidate for you and your organisation.
Yeah, such a good point you make. And I also think that's why I kind of, I like when people interview in pairs. Yeah, I think that gives, perspective. And I also think in the interview process, it's really important to be asking the same questions to every single candidate, not to kind of use it up and change it, because you can't really compare in that scenario. So there's a question come in just around ageism. Ageism is unfortunately a bias, and unfortunately I see it. Certainly not something that we want to be focusing on, but I'm not quite sure who asked that question, but it's definitely ageism is out there. However, I think most organisations, and certainly every organisation we would tend to deal with, are more aware around these biases and have strategies in place to ensure that there is diversity. Everyone will have heard about D&I, and it's a massive thing in business right now, and so that goes to ageism as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for the question.
I find most of our hiring managers are usually trying to find someone that has the right experience for the role that's going to commit to the role. So, yeah, absolutely. We've all seen that there's times where people talk about they think they're not getting roles for certain reasons. But if the hiring manager and potentially the recruitment consultant you're dealing with is able to present your experience and your personality and background in the right light, that can always help. But it's really about getting the right experience and the right culture fit for the company and the organisation.
Awesome, thank you. So we'll go on to the final slide so that we let you away on time at 12:30, and I'll hand back over to Ben.
Okay, so from this point, this is the point where you've actually already now hired the candidate, they've accepted your offer, and you're looking to get them to start on a certain date. Depending on how long it is, if they're serving a notice period, let's call it 4 weeks, so it might be 5 weeks from when they sign the contract until when they actually start the role. It's really important to keep the candidate engaged throughout that process. It can be quite daunting for them, first of all, resigning from a role, or if they're not in a role before they start, there can be nerves and anxiety around starting and things like that. So for hiring managers, we often suggest them to send a text to the candidate, give them a call, take them for a coffee if you've got time. Depending on how long the duration is, it might even be get someone from the team to reach out to them. So when they come into the office, they've not only met the direct people they're interviewing with, but a couple of people in their team. So it's a little bit warmer for them coming into the business. And they can sort of feel a lot more welcomed and things like that, rather than just filling out contracts and things like that, which is formalities. They can meet a few people before they start in a business. We find people have a much nicer hiring process like that. And then from there, a key thing is making sure you're prepared for when they start. We've seen numerous cases of clients essentially have someone turn up on day one and they're not ready for the person to start. And more often than not, the candidate in that process doesn't feel very welcomed, doesn't feel like they've been well sold into this role. And we've seen situations where they turn up on day one after serving a 4-week notice period. There's no laptop, their computer systems aren't working, and oftentimes they'll leave. That they feel like the business isn't ready for them to start. They haven't been sold the dream as they've been talked about, and they just don't feel it's the right opportunity for them. So as hiring managers, it's really important to make sure that everything's set up for when this person starts. If you're away, make sure there's other people in the business that know they're starting on that day, and really make sure that when they do start, a nice solid induction program is sorted out for them for the first day, the week, the month. And oftentimes you can set up a buddy, set up someone in the office, maybe even a peer, someone to show them where the lunchroom is, where the good places are to go, how to use certain parts of the system and things like that, and really how to integrate well and quickly into the organisation for long-term success.
Yeah, we operate a buddy program for our new starts, don't we, Ben? And it's as well as our more formalised mentoring program. But the buddy system really is for anyone coming in. They're kind of hooked up with someone potentially in another office, so it could be Melbourne, Brisbane, where they catch up in that first week on Teams. Usually a sort of peer level individual where they can just feel that kind of connection and engagement. And the other thing that you were saying, and I thought it was a really good point, Ben, was around that between offer and start date, it is super important for some engagement to occur, because it would feel really weird, wouldn't it, if you accepted an offer, you didn't hear anything from the organisation until it's kind of crazy, isn't it, if you think about it? So these little 1%ers, in my mind, are things that just make an enormous difference for a candidate and just their whole onboarding and process for me is really, and it takes minutes. It doesn't take a lot of time.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we might just, I'm conscious of time. I'm just looking here. I need my glasses. Oh, someone said, should the team invite the new starter to lunch before their start date? Absolutely, if that's a thing. And yeah, for sure. We would often do that here at Paragon. We would never have a 4-week period where we weren't, engaging with someone who was starting with us. It could be a lunch. It could be, Spencer, just even a phone call. That's kind of enough for most people. And then also to kind of let them know what they should expect in advance, how their first week is going to, because people will be nervous. Luckily I've not had many jobs in my life, so I've not had many first days. But I know it is nerve-wracking for people on that first day, regardless of seniority. So I'll give just a minute for any other questions. But I hope we've provided some value, and I'm sure everyone on the call is across most of these things. But it's good to recap. And even as we were preparing this, Ben and I were having a bit of a laugh, thinking, right, okay, we need to get on this. We need to be doing more of that. And so it's always good to kind of refresh. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining. And if there's any questions that come into your mind, please feel free to shoot us an email or give me a call or Ben a call, no problems at all. Our next webinar, which is exciting, is going to be in July. Is it the 6th, Stacey? 4th of July. Is going to be held by Sarah and Hayden from our Brisbane office. It's going to be I think it's going to be very informative. They're going to do a little bit more of a in-depth kind of employment market analysis year to date. and give a bit of advice around what they think will be happening out there in the remainder of the next 6 months. They'll go over like an industry overview, where we're seeing growth, which sectors we're seeing growth in, maybe some information around what candidates are truly looking for in order to make a job change. Skills and experience in demand, as Ben mentioned in the very first intro, people are hiring. The unemployment rate is still extremely low, and top talent is very, very difficult to come by. It's still an issue. So I'll let you go. I think we're bang on. Oh, look at that, 3 minutes. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Stacey, for organising and sorting out all the technology. And yeah, I hope to be speaking with some of you very soon. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
That was
That's good.
Is it all right?
Yeah. A little chit chat.